Good morning, afternoon now by 2 minutes, everyone. I'm Louis Davis Jr., State Director of AARP District of Columbia. And here in the District of Columbia, we have 83,000 plus members, and we represent them and anyone else 50 and older in the District of Columbia, helping them to live their very best lives. One of the reasons we're here today, oh, that's right, that is one of the reasons we're here today. We're trying to find out from folk how they've been persevering, how they have stories of resilience, even during times of struggle and strife during this pandemic of COVID-19. We want to help people to know that each and every one of their personal stories matters to not only them and their loved ones, but to their broader community. It is their stories that make up the patches in a quilt that make up that community. Without their patch, there's a hole in the quilt. We need their stories to be told. That's why you're here today. Helping us today are experts in the power of storytelling, how to tell those stories, how to archive those stories so that they're not lost for you, your loved ones, for generations to come, and your broader community, wherever you call home. We hope you find today's exercise instructive. We hope you'll stay tuned because we won't be done even after we finish here today. We haven't talked to Dr. Moody about this yet, but we're not quite done with this. And we're going to be watching all the great work that you all are about to do in collecting your stories over the next few weeks and next month. With us today will be Dr. Shirley Moody Turner. She's Associate Professor of English and African American Studies at Penn State University and the co-director with Gabrielle Foreman of Penn State's new Center for Digital Black Research. The center will be the home to the Colored Conventions Project, Douglas Day, and the soon-to-launch Black Women's Organizing Archive, a public-facing digital project that recovers and celebrates Black women's historical contributions to movements for social justice. Also with us today, Denise Berger. Ms. Berger is a PhD candidate in English literature at the University of Delaware and the committee chair of the Colored Conventions Project. She has been a co-leader of the exhibits team, chair of the project's Community and Historic Church Outreach Committee, and co-chair of the Curriculum Committee. Also with us, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask everyone to mute your lines because I can hear that background noise, so it means everyone else can as well. Also with us is Adrina Eiffel. Ms. Eiffel is CEO of Eiffel Doubleback Global Group, a firm that specializes in cultural heritage management and has over 25 years of experience in event production, project management, and strategic communications. Her experience includes creating and developing audiences for archives focused on global Black communities. She is a graduate of Williams College, Howard University right here at home, and George Washington University here at home as well. She serves on several educational and philanthropic boards. Now I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Shirley Moody Turner, who will tell us about what we're going to do next.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Mr. Louis Davis, for co-sponsoring and co-organizing this event with the Center for Black Digital Research and the Office for Digital Pedagogy and Scholarship at Penn State. As Mr. Davis said this week and emphasized last week, we stand at the precipice of an historic but not unprecedented moment. We have seen a global pandemic rage through our communities and our nation, disproportionately impacting Brown and Black lives. We have seen the continued devaluation and assault on Black lives in the form of state-sanctioned and vigilante violence. And yet we have also seen the systemic violence and racism met with continued and resurgent acts of protest, of organizing, of care, courage, affirmation, perseverance, and resilience. And we are grateful to the Smithsonian's Anacostia Community Museum for issuing the call to document these moments of resilience. In our workshop last week, we reflected on this call to document and tell our own stories, both historically, but especially given the urgency of our current moment. How have Black lives been impacted? How have communities supported each other? What reflections can we offer on events of global and national scale? How did the pandemic impact our everyday lives. So we are excited to welcome everybody here today as we continue that discussion while also hopefully creating opportunities for more interactive dialogue and exchange. We want to thank you all again. A special thank you to Ms. Johnsy Lancaster again, and a welcome to the women from AKA for joining us. We also want to say welcome to our Delta sisters as well, who are joining us. We got some messages in the chat, so we are excited about that. I know we had representatives last week, and perhaps they're back, from the Paul Laurence Dunbar House in Ohio, from the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. We are really excited for the different groups and organizations that have come out. So please feel free to shout out your group in the chat if you want to. Let us know where you're from, who you represent, who your people are. We would be happy to have you. Just share that out in the chat. So a few quick reminders. Again, you can use the chat function to share, ask questions. We'll be monitoring that throughout the workshop. You can also follow us on Twitter at ccp_org or #DigBlack. You can follow us on Facebook. We'll be monitoring the posts there and try to incorporate those questions or any feedback you have into our Q&A session as well. And finally, once again, I'm going to drop into the chat our links to register to vote, to take the 2020 census. And there's also a link there that the Colored Conventions Project has created with instructions on how to add a call to mobilize for the vote. So they have instructions on how organizations and groups can add those links and add those banners to your website. So please, as much as we're here to celebrate these stories and tell our stories right now, we're also always thinking and looking ahead. This is a historic moment, not only in the sense of the pandemic and the protests, but that it also coincides with the census and with an election year. So we want to be mindful of that and keep our eyes on that ways we can participate. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to our event co-organizer, Denise Berger, who can say a few words about our format today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moody Turner, and welcome again to everyone. Thanks again for joining us. Really excited about the work that we're going to get done today. So we have two fabulous presenters who worked really hard in conjunction with the presenters who were on the docket last week. And no, if you weren't with us last week, you will not miss anything. You can actually watch a broadcast either on AARP's website or on the CCP's website. We'll have information at the end of this broadcast to let you know how to do that. So you haven't missed anything. And these actually are independent, even though they're connected. And so we're going to have two presentations, and these presentations are going to really center and explain the value and the utility of preserving your own stories, your own history, the artifacts and the objects, whether they are pictures or certificates, funeral programs, Bibles. What are the objects, the pieces that you collected, either deliberately or even accidentally over your life, that tell stories that evoke an aspect of who you are and the legacy that you would like to leave, that testifies to the life that you lived and or the people that your family constitute. So we're going to have both an academic, i.e. talking about the theories and the ideas, and then a very practical piece of this workshop, which will be devoted to how you actually do these things and where you can place these items. And so if you want to, go ahead, get out a piece of paper and a pad or a pencil and a pen so you can take notes, or your phone, or however it is that you are ordinarily in the habit of making notes of information that would be important or useful. But again, this also is going to be recorded and made available. So if you miss anything, don't worry. You will not actually miss it because you'll be able to get it, because we're going to have the recording available. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to our host, Mrs. Dr. Moody Turner, who is then going to take us into an introduction of Ms. Adrena Eiffel, who will be the first presenter, after which we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to have a discussion, and then Dr. Curtis Small will be our second presenter, and then we'll have a Q&A. So if you have any questions or any issues that come up, save them for your breakout room, or if they're bigger than the breakout room, save them so we have the big people come in afterwards. That'll be Ms. Eiffel and Dr. Small to go ahead and address whatever concerns you might have. So again, we're going to have the first presentation, breakout rooms, then the second presentation, and then question and answer. Dr. Moody Turner.
Thank you. So I'll actually turn it over to Ms. Eiffel without further ado. I think Mr. Davis did a great introduction, and I will just say that I've known Adrena for a couple decades now, and has seen the amazing work that she has done in terms of preserving and documenting Black history in Washington, D.C. And also, this isn't in her bio, but the filmmaker for a film on Robert Smalls. If people don't know, it's a great documentary film. So just a plug for Adrena before she gets started. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Eiffel without further ado.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moody Turner. And I want to definitely thank Mr. Davis, ARPDC, all the members there, as well as the Center for Black Digital Research at Penn State, all the members and team that are on. And as well as AKA. I just also have to add that I digitized the AKA collection at Howard University. So some of your names are familiar. And so I really also appreciated the hard work that you guys did about in preservation. And anybody else who's out there, as we know, this is Zooms are all little squares, so I can't see you all at once, but if we were in person, I would give you all eye contact. So I want to talk a little bit about everybody has a story to tell. And I'm going to spend my time really on focusing on you as individual storytellers, you as historians, and I'm going to deputize you right now to be an archivist. I am not a trained archivist. However, some of them are my best friends. I work with them all the time. I love the work that they do. And I see our role as being in service to the history that generations to come will really need to understand the time that we're living in and to understand the context of global Black history. So in that way that everybody has a story to tell, we all have a story to tell that needs to be preserved. We are all an eyewitness to history. I think we can all relate to the question of where were you when? And in that, in your own personal life, in your family's personal life, in your professional life, in your community service life, you have been a witness to that history. And all of that is important to preserve. And also, you're an advocate for history collection. You're an advocate for archiving. We talk a lot about perseverance. We talk a lot about resilience. And during this time, this unprecedented time that we're in, we know that for generations to come, people will be looking back at this time. But we also have to remember that in there are moments of joy. There are moments of ordinary sort of life is unfolding while everything is happening. And so I urge you to also collect those stories, collect those mementos, your birthdays, your, if you have children or grandchildren, family members doing amazing, extraordinary, and even ordinary things. Those are particularly things that we need to collect during this time because they show that we as individuals, we as a community are living, thriving, and we are resilient and continuing on. And so that shows that sort of 360 view. And without that, that's not going to be in the newspaper. So we already know that, most media is being collected. But what we need to add, and I would use the word, we need to add the color to that, is that it's us who are going to bring that. Next slide, please. Now, in those stories, in being an eyewitness, you play a very important role. Sometimes in the stories, you are the main actor, as you will, and sometimes you're the director. And as an archivist, now that you all have accepted that role, you play that director role of collecting those. And we'll talk a little bit now and a little bit later on about what we do with those collections. But I want to spend a little bit of my time expanding your mind about how to do that collection and what is worthy of collection. Now, trained archivists might say, oh, there's this particular thing or that particular thing. But as one who really dives into collections, sometimes the most ordinary or the most least academic things are things that I find the most important to tell about what has happened on that specific day, what happened in that era, and what happened in that time period. So don't hesitate to, when you're putting together your stories, putting together your collections, whether it be personal collections, whether it be your organization's collections, to really ask yourself several questions. And put yourself in the place of, if you're that director and you're sitting in this seat, how do you want that story to be told, and how do you want that story to be received? So I always go back to the who, the what, the why, the where, and the how. So I always encourage people, particularly, and now that we're in the digital age, it helps to be able to record as much information about each item that you are collecting. So if it's a photo, for instance, I have a young child, and we have the class photos. Everybody has a class photo. I myself cannot remember everybody in my class photo. So I tried to have her tell me everybody's name on that photo. Because years from now, it might be important. You never know who's in your class now that did something later. But it also puts in context what was happening at that time when you were in first grade or 12th grade. And when I, as a researcher, come to look at it, it's also interesting just to see who were you sitting next to, who was in the back row. And so as much identification as you can do for those items. And crowdsourcing is also a great way to build community around collecting, particularly when you're doing it for an organization, and asking people, do you remember these? Do you remember this person? Do you remember that person? What were they? Do we know anything about their affiliations, their titles, their relationships to the other people in the photos or news clippings? So I'd stress to do that while you have it in front of you, while you remember it, write it down or make a note of it. And also, I just want to say that everything that I'm talking about, I do tend to do things a lot by hand, but there's so many resources that are out there, and we can definitely share those with you about how you can do them digitally, how you can do them online, and they can support you in your work. Now we go to what. So I know that you all have been thinking about that your different items that you want to talk about today, and they range. I have seen, for instance, I'll reference the AKA collection. There's a lot of ephemera in there, whether it's signs or placards, buttons, ribbons, all sorts of different things, mementos that really, really tell the story of the organization. And in our own families, we can also look to see what has been important. I'm sure celebration napkins, it ranges to the legal documents. Everything has a story, and it's important to actually describe what that is, because from years from now, those things will really make it important to whoever's going through that archive. I'm going to go to where. I'm going to save why for last, and I'll tell you in a minute why I'm doing that. Where? The time, the place, the situation. So if we look at the time in what we're now calling our COVID time and the pre-COVID time, and soon we'll be saying post-COVID times, that situates us in a very significant moment in our our history, the history of the world. And when we look specifically at Black Lives Matter, within that, using that as a term individually, Black Lives Matter, we want to be able to record as much as possible about where it was taken, where it was done, where specifically a place, a city, a street, because we know, that oftentimes if you visit a place, you come back a year later, it looks very different. And the only way that someone will know in 100 years that it looked different is because you recorded it. And how essential that is. I think we've all probably, some of us, our elementary schools are no longer there, but they're meaningful. They had an impact on that community. And it needs to be known that that school was there and that school made a valuable impact on that community. So I would urge you to take the time to do that as well. And situationally, if there's something that happened on that street, I look back on my own personal collection. Where was I when President Obama was inaugurated? Where was I when he was elected? I bought a TV just to watch the election. And so that, in itself, I might not keep the TV for the rest of my life, but I will know that this, in a picture, this will be part of the story that I tell. So I'm going to go back to why. And why is crucial for not only you as the archivist, but also as someone who's going to look into that archive. Why should I care? Why did you decide to save this, make this an important part of the story? And why, as I, the person who is receiving your story, why should I care that this is part of the story? Why do I need to know that you saved this? I think that is also something that you can use to determine what you are going to keep and add to your story and your collection, and sort of rounds it out. And lastly, in this, when you're putting together your collection, your story, your archive, how did it unfold, and how did you feel when you were putting this story together and this collection together and these artifacts? I think specifically for our community, it's very important that we recognize the emotion and the feeling behind it is a significant factor. We've gone through the who, we've gone through the specifics, I'll say, the time, the place, the date, the people. But undergirding all of that, my argument is that the feeling and the emotion behind it is what makes it a story that is worth sharing. And as a researcher, I'm always digging deeper to find out what that person was feeling, what that person, what was their, in a sense, what their state of mind was, and what the emotion behind it in their choice of making sure that this can be shared with a wider audience. Next slide. So many of you might recognize this person, Representative Barbara Jordan from the great state of Texas. I was fortunate enough to go to see her archive. It's at Texas State. Yes. Texas Southern. And I would say that Barbara Jordan was an archivist. Her collection is a vast collection, because even before she came to Congress, even before she sat on the Watergate hearings, she saved everything. She made recordings, she noted things that she believed were significant. She knew that her story mattered. As a child, she knew that her story mattered. And I would say that we all could learn from her, right? So when she was in college, did she know that she was going to live this, life, this life that we would all know and revere? No, but she knew she was going to make a difference, and we're all making a difference. And so in her specific collection, I use her as a great example, and she's inspirational to me because she really made sure that she recorded everything. She even literally in the 70s carried a recording device that basically was the size of a steamer trunk around with her everywhere. So those of us who can carry our little iPhones and Androids, we can benefit from that to do a quick recording, to do a jot of a personal note on there, to take a photo. And so that when sometimes I want to say, oh, I'll just do it later, I remember her and I take that picture. I jot myself a note down, or I record myself remembering the significance of where I am. I would also, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, and Dr. Smalls will talk about this as well, that as you have a bevy of things in your collection and you're wondering, okay, I have this here, I have that there, how do I start, or how do I sort of get it organized? One thing I always tell people is that if you get together a box and something that is archival safe, that, and it will tell you on the packaging to check the package. First, I really urge you to check your packaging to make sure that it says archival safe, acid free. But put that box, right? 1 or 2 boxes, depending on how much stuff you have. And as you go through your items, put it in that box first so that it's in a designated spot. It might sound like, oh my goodness, I don't have enough time in my day to, write down who, when, all these different things. But the key thing is we want to make sure that it's preserved. We want to make sure that it's safe. We want to make sure that it can inform, inspire, and just be a record of the history, your eyewitness for generations to come. So put it in that place that we know that it'll be safe. And so that is getting a box, archival safe, acid free, and putting your birth certificate, your awards, your photos, your trophies, all sorts of symbols that you have. That is something that you want to mark this moment, these moments of resilience, these moments of joy, these moments of connections and community, these moments of perseverance. And you can also do that digitally. So I have a folder on my computer that I also have backed up. And I can scan it. So I have a scan app on my phone. I can make a copy of it so that it sits in one folder, but I have a backup of it. Do that as well. And if you also, if it is a file, make sure you rename it so that it is something that you'll remember. Because oftentimes when you scan something, it'll come up with the date, 2020, 07, something, and a whole bunch of numbers. A week from now, you won't remember what that is. Just take that extra second to rename it to say birth certificate or whatever the case may be. I think that's critical. And so as you're gathering these things and you want to really spend the time, I would also say that it's important you can also recruit people in your organization, in your family. And we can go to the next slide. So as you know, it's always a great activity, an intergenerational activity. And I saw this, and I saw Christine McDowell, who attends Middlebury College. One of her projects was doing an oral history in Wilmington, North Carolina. And as I was reading her blog post, I really wanted to, use this picture because I thought it really spoke to how the value of oral history is in terms of collecting, and how it can be useful on several levels. Well, one, we know young people know how to use these digital technologies in their sleep. So, excuse me, they're all, that's a big help. But also sharing those stories, we often don't have time to sit at the knee of our elders, but this is a good way to be able to do that and capture everything that we need, and share it as widely as possible. I often quote my elders just in those stories that I've heard, not often knowing that it is becoming a record of history, and maybe I haven't written it down anywhere else. But I think when they quote you, it perpetuates it, and it keeps it, and it keeps those moments of resilience going further and further in an informal way. And with that, you can see that he is using his laptop. He's also, I think, using a recorder in there, and all of these things are available on your laptops, your phones, and any digital device you have. And so feel free to use those at any time that you may have. I want to check the time because I'm not seeing it. Do I have a few more minutes, or?
It's 12:33, so we probably want to break into groups within like the next minute or two.
Okay. All right. So I'll just wrap up. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you in groups, and after we come back and hear from our other speaker, that what you're thinking about, what objects and items that you have, and how we can be help to you in terms of furthering this collection, making sure that you are capturing the history that you have witnessed, those moments of resilience and joy, and just community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrina. So many great points and tips to get people started and thinking about the whole range of activities related to documenting stories and preserving histories. So we are going to go into breakout rooms now. And what we're going to do, so you're not surprised when this happens, you're actually going to be moved into a breakout room. We'll have a core group that's going to remain in this room right here in the main room. And then everyone else will be moved into a breakout room with a facilitator. We'll ask the facilitator to please, introduce yourself. And then we'll have about, let's say about 12 minutes for the breakout rooms. And there will be about 3 to 4 people in the room per facilitator. And you'll have lots of opportunities to share, hopefully. Well, if people keep their sharing within reason, everyone should get a chance to share in the breakout rooms. And the questions, if you didn't have these questions ahead of time and you're coming new to it, you can help us think through these questions in relation to the different participants, what they share within the room. But the questions quite simply were, if there was an item that would document this moment or could document this moment, what would it be? And what are, say 3 really critical details you would share about that item? Or if you have a story that really documents or speaks to this moment, why that story? What does it convey? What does it represent? What does it encapsulate for future generations? So those were really pretty simple questions that we wanted to use as a launching point for the discussion. So in a couple seconds here, I think that we'll all be moved into our breakout rooms. We'll be in the rooms. Facilitators, if you can pay attention, about, I think, 12 minutes or so in the breakout rooms. And then I believe that you will be moved back into the main room at the end of that session. Okay. All right. So I feel like we have to click our heels 3 times and see what happens. Okay. I think it should be happening. And I think you have to say, okay, that you'd like to join your breakout room. So we'll see you.
There'll be snacks in my breakout room.
How do you join the breakout rooms? You'll be asked,
Yeah, I think there's something that'll come up.
but it hasn't come up yet.
It should
It
happen
hasn't come up yet.
automatically.
I think
Yeah,
it's
but I
happening
think
now.
she said, yeah, but I also think she said originally that we would stay in the main area. Folks from Alpha Kappa Alpha would stay in where we are.
Oh, okay.
See,
Yeah, unless I
we stay in the
misunderstood her,
main
but I was,
area.
yeah, but when she was doing instructions, I was on since whatever 11:40 or whatever. I think she mentioned that. Okay.
So this is our breakout room then. This is our breakout room.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I thought it would be smaller. She said about 3 or 4.
Four,
It's
yeah.
6,
I'm not sure.
2,
I'm not sure. That's
8
we'll
of
find
us.
out.
Well, I
We'll
don't
find
think
out.
we're quite breaking out. I think we're
All of
kind
us
of,
We're not
here.
breaking out, so we're
Right.
Yeah.
not going anywhere.
right. I
You're
think
not
we're in a
going-
kind
I
of a
didn't go
pause.
anywhere.
Yeah, I think we're in a
Neither
pause
did I.
mode.
We are not going anywhere,
Right.
Sorors. We're not going anywhere.
Right.
Okay, so do we just start
just-
talking?
Do we have a designated facilitator?
No,
Yes, I think that might be me.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
good.
Oh, great.
Oh.
Okay.
I can do that. I can
All right.
lead you guys into questions. Of course, I want you to do most of the talking, but I can
Yes.
do the prompts. Is that
I
okay?
definitely
Okay.
have a question for you.
You have a question for me? Okay. Is that
Yes.
okay? Should we start with that?
Sure. Well, one of my questions is, where do we keep all of this information? Unless we're able to digitize everything. For example, photos. Yesterday, I was looking for a professional photograph of myself, which caused me to go back through a lot of photographs. I didn't find the professional photo, but I found so many photos of my family when my kids were little and all the places we had been and the things we were doing and did. It brought back so many wonderful memories. And I really, really do now want to make that a special project so that my surviving son and my granddaughter will be able to trace their family roots, even to include my husband's mother passed away when he was 8 years old. I have one photograph of her and her mother for them, but there's just so many. Then I have my own personal papers. I'm not a person who has Did someone tell me to stop?
No.
No, and this is the last thing I'm going to say. I have a number of awards, not that I have enough to fill a room, but quite a few. Where do you put all these things? That's the question, the main question. How do you house them?
So what I would say, a couple of different things is that I tell you where not to put them. Don't put them in the attic or the basement because the extreme temperatures would erode them. I would also say that as we have time to sort of think about it, think about a place, an institution where you'd want to have them live, where they can be preserved properly, so that you right now are the guardian of them. But I would also think long term about where you want to put them. If there's an institution, a university, or something that you think would be a good place so that not only could your kids use them, but other people could benefit from them, I would think about that. But in the immediate time, when they're not in the basement and they're not in the garage, they're not in the attic, if you could devote sort of a space to them so that you can continue to catalog them and put them in the appropriate archival safe materials. So one key thing I've learned in photographs, you know how we all used to have the peel and stick photo albums?
Yes.
Don't try to take them out of those. Keep those in them, keep them as they are in there. They're better off that way than trying to peel them off. But if you can put them in a place, add some notes, and one of our next questions is what 3 details would you add to those if someone was coming to see them at a museum or an exhibit, and be able to work through those in a way that you can say, this album is, dedicated to your husband and his family. This album is dedicated to your children when they were in grade school, in high school, at different times, your family, your profession, all different sort of highlights of your life, I would say to do that as you're working your way through them and you're making those longer decisions about what institution can house them in a temperature safe and really research-based arena.
That really brings me to my second question. I'm going to make it quick. You know, Barbara Jordan was an important person. Apparently, she knew she was going to be an important person. But what institution will really want certain documents or items? Because, you know, when my husband passed away, he ended up being an archivist in his last assignment at the Library of Congress. And he really did have a lot of wonderful, important scientific papers that they kept for a year before I went down and cleaned his office out. But then once I brought him home, it's, what do I do with them? I suppose had we had this conversation, I would have approached perhaps his university, which was Howard, or his high school, Dunbar, and to see, but I think I still have a few left. But, you know, those are questions that you wonder, what do I do with all of this stuff?
And I would say, don't hesitate. Does somebody want to add to that conversation?
No, I thought you were moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just say, don't hesitate. Yeah. What you might think is ordinary to you, I, as a researcher, would find extraordinary.
Right. I would think to contact the different museums in our area, the Reginald Lewis Museum, the National Museum of History and Culture, or the Anacostia Museum. I contacted the Reginald Lewis Museum for some items that I have, and the items went before the board, and they did want some of the items. They didn't want all of them, but they said they wanted some of the items, and I am donating those items to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum in Baltimore. So I would say contact the museums. It would be important to them. They would have to make that determination.
I was just going to add something about this present moment. I think I've done a pretty good job of saving, since I do history, 19th century history, but I'm thinking about this current moment. And since I'm in that category of people who they tell to stay at home, I feel like some part of that, what's going on now, I'm missing because I'm only participating vicariously by TV or so on. But I thought of an excellent source yesterday, which is my daughter, who is a professor at the University of Minnesota. She lives in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and she has my two grandsons out there, and they were right in the middle of the whole Floyd issue and everything that was going on. And guess what? She wrote it. She's an active Facebook user. So I pulled up her post. Her Facebook post chronicles everything from day one when it happened to when they walked down there, jumped in the car and looked at the spot. And then she wrote an editorial for her sociology department about it. And then she just wrote personal experiences of how she was feeling. And I saved all of those posts. Now, my question is, so how do I make sure 100 years from now, when her grandchildren are wondering, well, what was that like to be in the middle of a pandemic and to be caught up in this racial strife? Got her own words. To me, that's a particularly valuable part, that we're reading about it, or I was reading about it from a personal experience, not from the newspapers. Here's what happened, but here's how it affected me. And of course, I was particularly concerned because I wanted her to get my grandchildren back home. But the point is that that's an excellent source because you're getting a personal reaction to something that's going on while it's happening. I just hope that when I hit the save button, that it's still there, but I want to make sure that it's accessible years later.
All of that digitized stuff will still be there, and you can also there are many people who have the profession. In fact, I know one guy in Virginia. His whole business is helping people digitize their records, their pictures. From slides. Remember back in the day, those slides they used to have and all that. Convert that to media that people can use today. But yes, telling those stories that way, I think is so awesome. People are, on Instagram, on Facebook, so even, believe it or not, even things like LinkedIn, people are writing
And
stories
it's similar to
about
what
what's
we
been
did.
happening.
It's similar to what we did in high school. Create your own yearbook. I remember going down to the Black Lives Matter Plaza, and I have my cap, Hope. So it is on Facebook, and this is the cap that I wanted to share with everyone, because back in 1963, I remember marching, and I remember the death of Dr. King and what it did to me, how I wanted to make a difference in my life and in the life of my family and the life of my community when I integrated Jones Commercial High School at 15. We've all been 15. We've all been 16. So at that time, I had hope. And here today, I still have this cap, hope, that this is for the future generation of young people to know that there's still hope. I just didn't believe today I would be going through the same things that I went through when I was 10, when I was 15, when I was in my 6 decades later. So a yearbook. Create a yearbook the same way we did in high school. Create a yearbook and put all of that information in your yearbook, the photos, the caps.
I would definitely echo that, especially as I think we have about, 30 seconds left before we leave. I want us to take away several things, because I think we really answered these questions without even going through them one by one. But that emotion, that feeling, what it meant to you, always record that. Also know that on social media, we need to save those things somewhere else, because if we lose your password or something happens and that Facebook is no longer there, we still need to capture it, because you still do own those words. So finding a way to put those down and then annotating them, just like we said, just like Ms. St. Clair said about what that meant to you. Like Ms. Logan, you said, I see my daughter, she's doing this. Also, I'm a little worried, but I'm proud of her, but I am a little worried. I think that's important for the next generation to know how you felt reading your daughter's words and seeing the pictures come from there. Just like Ms. St. Clair said, and are we still here? Hope. The hope continues. What's the multidimensionality to all of those things? And it's a yearbook. I would say Dr. Moody Turner, who works on Anna Julia Cooper, in her collection, which is also at Moreland Spingarn, she had scrapbooks. And we all remember that part of the yearbook, the brag book at the end of the year, you'd have everybody, sign in.
Yes.
And so I think we can't lose that. We can do it digitally, we can do it by hand, but I think that the element of that is something that is one that's special to our community and the way we express ourselves. And we need to continue that. And it also tells that personal eyewitness story, what makes the moment in time so powerful.
Adrena, where would we go to get locally the archival materials, the boxes, the sheets, and so forth? Can you say where in DC or Maryland?
Sure. I mean, they're at Target. They're at Target.
Office Depot, places like that.
Yes. So the key.
Office Depot.
Yep. Office Depot. I'm sure they're on Amazon. So those of you who are not leaving your house, don't worry, you can still order them. But the key thing is to read, to make sure in the description it says archival safe, acid free.
Yes.
Because that's going to make the difference. But at most of your major retailers, where you'll find the boxes, the plastic sleeves where you can stick your loose things in to make sure that especially if you have, like, say, a grandparent's birth certificate or some important papers that might be fraying on the edges, put it in there. There's also, like, I have the newspaper the day of Obama's inauguration, so they come in variety of sizes, right? But I put it, you can look for the ones, particularly if you go to art supply stores, the ones that are large posters. Those of you who may have done the March on Washington, you might still have your poster, your placard, or your button. there's ones that fit those things. So think about it like when people collected baseball cards, there's different, sizes for everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my approach is very different in that I look at, I found a couple of pictures and it's 4 generations. My mother and grandmother were part of the Great Migration. They came from Mississippi.
Yeah.
And so that great, I think that my resilience now and throughout my life was based on their resilience. The fact that they were able to master that, to be productive and to raise a family that all are successful. And so
Yes.
Just trying to figure out how to show the importance of their resilience and having that experience and making sure that the lives of my family, of my sister and brother were meaningful. And so
we're probably related. Because my family is from Mississippi, Mississippi, and my father's from Arkansas, and they were they called themselves the Miller Hill.
Adrena, it says we have 10 seconds.
10 seconds. Okay. Well, anybody who has any lasting questions or thoughts, we can bring it to the big group after Dr. Small speaks. And it was a pleasure.
What would your contact information be, Adrena?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think basically everybody's going to come back to us.
We're back
because we're all here.
Yes. So Josephine, my family is from Mississippi.
Okay, mine from Aberdeen.
Where, Mississippi?
Oh, talk.
And my great grandfather, he lived to be 103 years old. And I always tell people that my great grandfather, he got his 40 acres and a mule because he worked and purchased each one of his family members. He bought each one of them out of slavery.
Okay.
Now that's worth
preserving. He worked on the railroad, brick by brick. He worked that railroad until he purchased his wife and his 8 children. He bought them all out of slavery. And we called him Papa Miller.
Hey, they're ready. They're ready to go back, Antoinette.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. I feel like we just got transmuted into a really interesting conversation that was taking place in this room. So welcome back, everyone. I hope that all of the breakout room discussions were as engaging as the one I had in my room was. Just really, I think, a great opportunity to hear the different ways in which the range of ways in which people are thinking about this moment, the range of materials that can be collected to represent this moment. And maybe we can just hear from like 1 or 2 of the facilitators about your room before we turn it over to Curtis. I will just say that we had great conversations in my room, one about collecting funeral programs as a way to document family history, and deciding to do this kind of in response to the pandemic, kind of reconnecting the family through weekly Zoom meetings, which I know a lot of people have done, right? And that's something that, we were talking in my group that people might forget about in 3 years or so, that this was a way in which family that might not have been talking weekly for years and years, all of a sudden were reconnecting weekly. And we also talked about school teachers and educating through this period. And we got the wonderful example from Miss English about having her thumb drive every semester, every year for the courses that she's teaching. And then this year having the one that had a DL on it for distance learning, and kind of marking what did that transition mean in terms of all of the different ways she had to adjust to educating in this, in this current circumstance. So great conversations. And is there 1 or 2 others who would like to share, report back on your group?
Sure, Diana, Miss Diana Hull Perkins, her object is an oyster shell, and that's because her family has over 200 plus years of being oyster farmers. on the shore, and one of her nieces right now is actually a marine biologist and an oyster farmer as we speak. So there's an unbroken tradition. There is a history going literally back in time. And another member of the group, her mother is about to turn 100, and for her 80th birthday, she created a photo collage of her that documented her years working for the U.S. Information Service as a teletype operator, right back into the present. And for both of them, their families go back 3 and 4 generations of living in D.C. So they're absolutely within the stories of their families is actually the stories of this nation. Also, it was very powerful listening to them share these stories out.
Louis here. I want to go next because I want to share one that I think will resonate with a wider variety of people, many of whom are not even on today's session, and that's because Sonia, who I was with, wasn't quite sure where to zero in on, and so I think it's easier when you have one or two very poignant, powerful stories to zero in on, right? Particularly if it's been handed to you by a parent or someone before you, and your duty is to carry it on. It's a little bit more difficult. And I think Sonia's is probably more typical, not knowing where to start. So she has an idea about writing a book, but that seemed daunting to her. And Sonia, I hope I don't misspeak here and get it just right. And she has a beautiful Caribbean accent. She would not tell me what island she's from. And Sonia, when you and I talk, you can tell me why you didn't trust me with that information. But so I got her we were talking and got her to thinking about maybe she might break it down into bite-sized pieces. So if a book seemed too daunting, maybe she could write an essay. And she said, well, I did write something for my daughter. And she said, it's about 2 pages long. And I said, well, what years did it cover? She said, well, from my primary school days up to, and Sonia wouldn't tell me what island you're from. I'm certainly not going to tell your age. So, 'cause I don't want to get in trouble, but she said from primary school, and it says some decades later. And I said, well, that's a lot. You got that into 2 pages? I said, what if you pulled out of any part of those 2 pages, an excerpt, a piece, and then write another essay about just that portion? She seemed to like that idea, and she's going to take it back to her daughter, she said, and then maybe she write enough essays, boom, she's got her book.
Yes.
That is wonderful. And I think that also brings us back to the Moments of Resilience project. And I'm going to drop the link in again, because that's a great exercise to help focus some of that, the range of things that could be talked about and could be told is, one item, one story. And it could be something that could start with being sometimes the hardest thing about getting started is not having a context for it. But if there's a set context, like here's the item and here's a write-up about what this meant and what this story meant, could be a jumping off point. Okay, so I think that it's 1:00, and I wish we could hear from everybody again to hear these stories. But I think we're going to turn it over to our next workshop facilitator, Curtis Small. And I will turn over to Mr. Davis to introduce him. And also, please continue to share, if you want to share tidbits of your story, resources, shout outs in the chat or questions.
Thank you, Dr. Moody Turner. Dr. Curtis Small is a librarian and coordinator of public services for the Special Collections Department at the University of Delaware Library. He coordinates the reference, instruction, and exhibition programs, and serves as a curator for the rare book collections. That was always one of my favorite. I didn't go to Delaware, University of Delaware, but at my alma mater, we had a rare books collection, and I just love the smell of rare books. He has done scholarly research on the print history of the colored conventions movement and the importance of Haiti within the movement. He holds a PhD in French from New York University and a master's in library science from the School of Library and Information Science at Simmons University. Dr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. First, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then I'm going to make sure that the screen is displaying like I want it to display. So like I said, I'll put out a little request to just make sure that you're seeing what I intend for you to see. So I've shared the screen, but now I'm going to go. I have to minimize and go in and start the slideshow. So you should see one slide with one line on it. Is that what everybody sees?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready to go. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the practicalities of preserving your item, and Ms. Eiffel already talked about some of that. This will be very, very preliminary because we don't have time to give a full discussion of this. I will make some basic points and then point you in the direction of other resources. And you also can follow up with me or archivists that you may know. Some of you are archivists, I think. But this is some basic information. But first, very quickly, I'll start with some ideas about sharing the meaningful items that we have talked about. First, to reiterate, you may want to submit your image or your story to the Moments of with a story to the Moments of Resilience project, which was the focus of last week about how to do that. And that will be an image with a short paragraph to explain it. Another quick suggestion is to share your item or your story in a blog, if you have a blog, or via social media. Now, social media may not be your cup of tea. You may have a family member who would be interested in doing that for you. What you see here is a Twitter. It's an image of a Twitter post, a tweet by my colleague Jesse Erickson at the University of Delaware. And Jesse is sharing his passion, which are books he's an expert in the 19th century writer. He's interested in Black Victorian culture, and so on. The writer Ouida, and he collects her, and he has collected this volume of her work, her fiction, with a memo written by her, put into the book. He's using technical language here, a holograph memo. That means it was written in her hand, added to the book. And you see the final line here, words can't express my joy. To follow up a little bit with what my colleague Ms. Eiffel said, the idea of emotion, the emotion that may have caused somebody to preserve something, but also the emotion that we may feel when we come across an item that somebody has preserved for us, is for me one of the most powerful things and the biggest pleasures that I have as a librarian in encountering these items that have, like time capsules, that those who have come before us have been able to, they outlive our ancestors and communicate to us. So social media or a blog may be one way, but you don't have to do that. It's an idea. Another one is to donate to an institution if you feel moved to do so. So the Anacostia Community Museum, now I don't know much about their donation procedures. I wasn't able to find anything online, and this is just a suggestion. If you want to donate, there are pros and cons, but an organization that you feel comfortable with and you trust and you feel that will honor your legacy. Most of us are African American here. This is a particular history that needs particular care and respect, right? So donating, if you feel free to, if you want to do so, is another idea. Or you can just decide to preserve your own items yourself at home for the future, which is part of what my colleague has already talked about. You don't necessarily want it to look like this. Hopefully, this may be how it looks at the beginning, but very quickly, a location to store these things in your home would be in closets maybe, or interior rooms of your house. We suggest that you avoid basements or attics because of the fluctuation in temperature, moisture, and such like things. Heat is a problem. We suggest that you store your items away from radiators and vents for the same reason, heat, cold. Do not store your items on the floor if you have them in boxes, for example, your documents. Insects can get to them more easily if there's flooding, for example, God forbid. in our institution, we never leave any of our items on the floor. It could be on a shelf, it could be even within a closet. You want your document. Now I'm emphasizing paper documents and photographs, which tend to be more fragile, and that's kind of what I work with most. So minimal exposure to light for photographs and paper documents because of the fading. If you have a document that's important in your family history, you don't want to put it in a frame and hang it on the wall because there's going to be a lot of light exposure. You may want to make a copy and store that safely and then hang your item in a copy on the wall. But we do not suggest that your precious items be exposed to light. And temperature for items tends to be room temperature or below. That's recommended. You don't want your items in very hot because it can cause them to degrade. For photographs, cold is actually okay for color photographs, contemporary color photographs. Humidity is also a problem. Moisture can cause your items to degrade. It can draw insects and that sort of thing. Now, we don't have archives in our home. You do the best that you can do. But if you keep your items out of really hot and cold environments, you're going a long way to help them last because they have to be preserved. They have to exist in order to be shared, right? So what I've covered here is just where and how to keep them. In terms of handling photographs, we suggest, and papers as well, always have clean hands when you handle. Every time before I go to work, every day before I start handling books or papers, I always wash my hands. When I come back from lunch, I wash my hands. That goes a long way to helping to preserve them. But we all know this pretty much. Avoid directly touching photographs and the negatives. You want to handle them around the edge because once a smudge gets there, that can lead to acidification. You may even want to invest in some archival quality gloves. We do not use them usually in our jobs at work, gloves for handling photographs or for handling anything. If you're going to be handling a lot of photographs, though, you may want to invest in gloves, but at least try not to touch that image, just handle the edge of the photograph. I'm referring to an unframed photograph. Once again, minimal exposure to light. And Ms. Eiffel already referred to archival quality photograph albums or folders that are acid-free because they are meant to help items to live. Acid breaks our materials down. This is an archival quality photograph album that you can buy online or from a vendor with sleeves that you would have to buy separately that are made of the type of plastic or polyester that will protect your item. Not all plastic is good plastic. I don't have time to get into details, but if you're buying archival quality items, you're going a long way. My time is already short. I don't want to go over time, but quickly, avoiding metal paper clips, plastic covered paper clips, if you want to have them on your items, are better. And never put glue or adhesive tape on any of your items. If you need to remove some adhesive tape that's been on there before, you can do it with some carefully unwaxed dental floss. Store your papers flat. When they're folded, over time, after 100 years, that fold may actually detach the folded piece from the rest of the document. And once again, using acid-free albums, folders. This is a document folder, a binder that has plastic protectors that are archival quality. And this, what you see over here at the bottom, is some archival folders and document boxes. If you want to store your things in your papers in folders, you want the papers in the boxes, protective archival boxes such as these. And very quickly, these are some vendors of archival quality products. You can, this will be recorded. You can Google these names. And these are not the only places you can get archival quality products, but these are reputable vendors. You can find things online as well, but you do want to be sure that your materials are archival quality. For further information, this was very preliminary and very quick, but unfortunately, this is a website, the Library of Congress website. Some of you may be familiar with that. Has information about your personal archiving. that there's this page, and then the Library of Congress has a number of pages but covering different formats, how to preserve photographs, and digitization, which I didn't get into. Digitization can be a way to protect very fragile items. You digitize it, and then you put the original in some archival quality protectors so it can be stored for a long time. And this is a YouTube video called Organizing and Preserving Your Family Papers that goes into more detail about this. So that's all I have. If there are any questions, I maybe get to them at the Q&A. Here's my contact information. If you'd like to reach out to me for some follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. That was really, really helpful. Lots of tips and pointers there for things that I definitely didn't even know. So thank you for sharing that. And so now we are going to turn it over to back to Denise Berger, who is going to see if we have any questions, and if our facilitators, our workshop facilitators, or anyone else can also join in to address any questions that might be coming up. And you also have a few minutes now. If you do have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we can get those out for the group.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Moody Turner. So I want to, again, as Dr. Moody Turner did, direct everyone to the chat. You'll see that there is the hyperlink for the Anacostia Museum, so that you can either copy it and or click on it and explore the options that are there. There's information from someone who's a docent at the Smithsonian. There we go, Janice Farabee, she just waved. So there's information from her as well. Ms. Eiffel put her information in the chat, and I asked Dr. Small to also put his information in the chat so that if people would like to get in contact with both of you, they'll be able to do so. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to raise? So Antoinette St. Clair, I think I saw was that a hand, or were you just agreeing with me?
I was agreeing with you. Okay. And I did have my hat. I think I shared this already. The hat that I wore when I went down to the Black Lives Matter Plaza, my hat of hope, and the same hope that I had in 1963 when I marched for the integration of schools. I'm marching today also for the hope of all of our future millennials and zennials, that they will get in the march and they will understand that this fight is forever. It never stops.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That is a hope that sustains us. That is a hope that keeps us moving toward the direction of full and complete liberation and actualization, because that is our birthright. Is there any question that anyone would like? Yes, Dr. Moody Turner.
Hi, there's actually a question that was sent to me that I will post to the group. So the question says, if you wish to share via blog or social media, is it better to research the framework of doing the blog first, or more extensive background on your subject matter to share? So I think that's a question about thinking about how much do you need to think about the framework of where you want to place the blog? Do you need to figure that out first, or do more kind of background research into the subject that you want to share about? So I don't know if
Lewis here, and it's not either or, it's both, right? So depending on the story you have to tell, you can't quite know the audience that might be interested in that story. And if you think you know the audience that might resonate with the story you have to tell, then you want to come to that audience with a well-told story. So I think you want to know both. You want to, I think, I would say that what's important first is the story you think you have to share. And then find the audience you think it might resonate best with.
And I think it's really important to remember that there's such a range of places that you can share. I think with Curtis's example of the Twitter, being able to literally share an item with a tweet, and there are people doing all kinds of really creative, innovative things on Instagram, a photograph from my granddad's closet with a short description of that, or race women sharing photographs of Black women leaders throughout history with a short description and information. And if social media, again, is not your thing, thinking about, does your group or organization have a newsletter that you might want to share that story in? So, there's just a range of places. It doesn't always have to be, if even, a Facebook post can become a space to share. But there are also other spaces, I think, like Curtis and Adrena were talking about, thinking about newsletters, thinking about even just preserving those, sharing them within the family, that there's lots of different outlets for that.
I would just like to add that the social media, it's become a public square. And there's everybody under the sun shouting on their own soapbox inside that public square. They don't even know who's listening half the time. So if you don't care who's listening to your story, then fine, get in the public square, stand by the fountain and shout it to the clouds, right? But if you're intending to share a message with family, friends, colleagues, and the like, then you maybe just going to the public square and shouting it as loud as you can with other 10,000 people that are there doing the exact same thing may not be the best place.
And also another thing to note, I would say that share is the through line, that it's important for you to share. So however you feel comfortable doing that, if it's just, recording it on your phone and not really worrying about punctuation and all of those things, if that seems to be a hurdle for you, I would still encourage you to do whatever you feel comfortable with, but just share it. And if you do decide to do it as a Facebook post or Instagram or social media, also remember that you need to save it somewhere else, because in case you can no longer get access to that account, you don't want to lose it. So make sure you do a screen capture, you save it as a document somewhere, you print it out or something, but make sure that you do share.
And I would say all of those things are very good advice. You don't necessarily have, it's more important to preserve your documents for you and your family and for the future. That's the foundation of any kind of sharing you're going to do digitally and online. You can think about whether you want to do social media later. If you already have a Facebook post, my suggestion for social media is to fit into maybe what you already do, or you get so motivated and excited that you think you do want to explore a way to share it. If you already use Facebook, that's a natural. More people share on Facebook, I would say, than anything. But make sure you have your items protected first. And once the Facebook posts are gone, the newer the digital media, the shorter the life. So you want your paper and your documents, your items protected for the future first.
Are there any other questions? Because we're also trying to be respectful of people's time. And of course, we're over, and that's okay, but we're not going to go by a whole bunch, much more over because time. Yes, ma'am, Miss Johnson.
I have a question. How do we get a copy of this recording?
Absolutely. So both the first and the second recordings will be posted on AARPDC's website, and will be posted on the Colored Convention Project Facebook page. And so we will put links to both of those. We can also probably send out, we'll send out an email to everybody who was registered that will have those links in the email. But you can go to AARPDC's site. I see that Louis Davis just posted it in the chat, and they will have both videos pinned to their site. And the coloredconventionproject.org will also have both videos pinned to our Facebook page, which just got posted in the chat as well. So you can copy those.
Great, thank you.
Them, absolutely. You can send them to whoever you'd like. You can bookmark them, and you'll be able to go to them as often as you like. They'll be there permanently. whatever that means in the digital world. Any other questions? Any other questions? Yes, John Lancaster. Yes, ma'am. You're on mute. You're on mute, John C. You're on mute. We can't hear you. You're on mute. You have to unmute. Yeah, still can't hear you. Still on mute. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay. I would like to know, Dr. Moody, in the near future, will there be any other workshops or webinars that we may participate in? I've been so moved by these series. I've really enjoyed them.
Well, thank you so much. We have been so grateful to be able to partner and to work on these events with you and with AKA. And we don't have a workshop exactly like this planned yet, but we are happy to keep people involved and in the conversation as we plan events going forward. We will have some events that members of the Center for Black Digital Research will be participating in the state of Pennsylvania about Black history and the importance of history, especially thinking of the historical force of Black movements for social justice and how they connect with our current moment. So we can share out about those as well. But what we will have coming up in February is our Douglas Day event. So we'll have another Douglas Day event in February. We'll have more details on that coming in the fall, but we would love for everybody to participate. Our Douglas Day event is a day of national service in honor of radical love for Black history. And what that can mean is public reading groups. It can mean transcribing Black archives together. So we'll share more about those events as they come up as well. Thank you.
One more quick question.
Louis, I want to add to the last question, if I could, real quick. I sent my email address into everyone there if you didn't have it already. I invite you to write to me and tell me if you'd like to do more of this. Dr. Moody Turner doesn't know it yet, but I've already told Emily that we're not stopping here. So the Anacostia Community Museum, and by the way, it is part of the Smithsonian. So it's the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum. And it was de facto the first national African-American museum in the country. And they certainly can be trusted with donations, as the Smithsonian has been trusted with millions and millions of donations over the decades. So I encourage you to look to it. But its Moments of Resilience project is collecting stories. And so they're collecting stories digitally and by phone. You can phone in your story and have it audio and have it recorded. But they're also taking them digitally as well. So I encourage you to, if you have a story to share, you can share it from the public square of Instagram, but you can also share it in the Moments of Resilience project. And that's going to be ongoing for about another 25 weeks or so. So we're looking here to engage again with Penn State University and Delaware State. And I hope you ladies are smiling. You're not out of this yet, because we want to follow along and maybe repurpose some of the stories and see where this goes and see what surfaces from stories of perseverance that people have in a pandemic that is nowhere from over.
That is a perfect note on which to close this out. So thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to, again, please direct everyone's attention to the chat. There are several resources. And Ms. Trinita Brown, please let whoever that was in the background waving furiously at us that we saw, him or her, and we give them all that love back. They're super cute, and they made it on the Zoom. 200 plus people saw them holler, and we hollered right back. So on that note, please, please, please pay attention to the chat. There are lots and lots of resources in the chat. Again, you can find the recordings. You can watch as many times as you like, both recordings. You can stop. Pat Fagan, are you trying to get my attention?
Just waving, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. And so now I'm going to ask everyone to put their mics on mute. Ask everyone to put their mics on mute. Everyone to put their mics on mute.
Hey, Mark, if you could go ahead and mute everyone, please.
Everyone to put their mics on mute. Thank you so much. Excellent. There we go. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. We're now going to hand the program over to Dr. Moody Turner. Dr. Moody Turner is now going to wrap us up with our final thank yous. Again, please check the chat. Please check the chat. There's lots of resources. There's many opportunities and ways for you to get more information, for you to review what we've covered today and review what we covered last week. And without further ado, Dr. Moody Turner.
Thank you so much, Denise. And I just wanted to reiterate what Mr. Davis said, that this is the continuation of work that we hope to keep doing. The Center for Black Digital Research is just launching. We haven't officially launched yet, but this is our third event. So we will officially launch, and this is just the beginning. So we're really excited to be part of the community. And I want to say thank you. I'm going to say thank you to a lot of people because their labor is not invisible. This is one of our principles, and one of the ethics of doing this work is that we recognize the many people who do the everyday work to make this happen. So I want to start by saying thank you to Mr. Davis again from AARP, but also Emily Pickren, who has been organizing and planning with us on AARP side, my co-director Gabrielle Foreman with the Center for Black Digital Research. I'm here. She enables me to be here. So she's off doing other work as well. Denise Berger, thank you so much for bringing all of the spirit and the joy that you always bring to every event. I want to thank Kevin Winstead. You can't see him, and that's good. If you can't see him, that means everything is happening as it is supposed to. I want to thank Kevin Conway with the Office of Digital Pedagogy and Scholarship for letting us have his amazing crew, Mark Kepler, Emily Spotkis, Jenna Sazi, Adrian Corbin, who have been the production team to make this happen. Want to thank Clay Coleman, Justin Smith, Sabrina Evans, Brandy Locke, Angela Tate, Lauren Cooper, Jim Casey, John C. Lancaster, and Melanie Adams. So just a whole group of people that have come together to make this happen. We could not be more grateful. And we want to give a very special thank you to our workshop facilitators today, Ms. Adrena Eiffel and Mr. Curtis Small, for the amazing work that they did and getting us thinking both about the importance of this work, how to get started, and how to carry it through. So thank you, everybody. Don't forget to vote. Please come out and join us again. We hope that this is just the beginning of an ongoing relationship where we can document Black history together. Thank you, everybody. And you can unmute, and now you can unmute. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Say goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Until we breathe again.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.
Hey everybody, across the world today, something is moving. Please don't get in the way. It's lifting spirits. The poor can feel its power. It's getting closer. This is no time to cower. Everybody,